The road had narrowed to a single lane of cracked asphalt by the time I realized I hadn't seen another car for nearly an hour. Pines pressed close on both sides, their trunks tall and straight like pillars holding up the night. The forest here was dense enough that the moon barely reached the ground. My headlights tunneled through drifting mist, illuminating wet pavement, fallen needles, and the occasional reflective sign leaning at an angle. Then I saw it. A road flare burned bright red in the distance, but cast no light on the ground. At first it looked ordinary, just a small red star trembling in the darkness ahead, the kind highway patrol used after accidents. Its glow pulsed faintly through the mist, bright enough that I instinctively slowed. But the closer I got, the stranger it became. The flare was brilliant, unnaturally brilliant. The color was an intense crimson, the kind that made your eyes ache if you stared too long. Yet the road beneath it remained black. No halo of light touched the asphalt. No red glow spilled across the pine needles. It hung there in the dark like a burning hole in the air. I eased off the gas. The tires hummed softly over the cracked pavement. Somewhere beyond the treeline an owl called once, then fell silent. The smell reached me next, sharp sulfur, metallic and dry, the unmistakable scent of a flare. But the air carried something else too. Stillness. The constant hum of insects that had accompanied me all night, crickets, cicadas, the faint electrical buzz of summer, had vanished. The silence felt thick. I slowed to a crawl. The flare stood maybe 50 yards ahead, planted upright in the center of the road. Its red fire burned fiercely, sputtering sparks that should have scattered across the asphalt. But the sparks seemed to vanish before they landed, dissolving midair like dying embers swallowed by water. I felt a slow tightening in my chest. The rational part of my mind started listing possibilities. A prank, a trick of perspective, maybe fog swallowing the light. But fog doesn't swallow light like that. Light always touches something. The road curved gently to the left just beyond the flare. Pines leaned over the shoulder of the road there, their branches heavy with moisture. I stopped the car about 30 feet away. The engine idled softly beneath me. The flare burned, and the ground remained untouched by its glow. I cracked the window. Cold air slipped inside. The sulfur smell grew stronger. The silence grew deeper. For a long moment I just sat there staring, waiting for headlights to appear behind me, waiting for someone to step out of the trees and wave. Nothing moved. The flare hissed softly. Then something strange happened to the shadows. At first I thought it was just my eyes adjusting, but the trees on either side of the road seemed to lean toward the flare, not physically, but in their darkness. Their shadows stretched toward the red glow as though pulled by it. Yet the flare still cast no light. I leaned forward over the steering wheel. That was when I noticed the road ahead of it. The asphalt just beyond the flare looked wrong, like a photograph printed slightly out of alignment. The center line faded oddly. The edges of the road blurred where they met the forest. For a moment I had the strange impression that the road continued, but not entirely in the same place. I shook my head and laughed under my breath. Okay, I muttered. Probably some kind of reflective paint trick. Or maybe I was just tired. I'd been driving all day. Still, the unease wouldn't leave. The flare flickered violently for a moment, bright enough that I had to squint. And in that instant, the glow revealed something impossible. Not on the road. Behind it, a figure stood among the trees. It wasn't fully visible, more like the suggestion of a shape where the forest should have been solid. Tall, unmoving. Its outline shimmered faintly in the red light. The moment passed. The flare dimmed slightly. The trees were empty again. My hands had tightened around the steering wheel. "Hello," I called through the open window. The word sounded thin and small in the stillness. No answer came. The sulfur smell thickened. A faint breeze stirred the mist along the ground. I checked my mirrors. Nothing behind me but darkness. Whoever had placed the flare had done it recently. The flame was still strong, the smoke curling upward in thin threads, which meant someone had been here, recently, watching the road. The thought slid quietly into my mind. Watching, I turned the headlights to high beam. The bright white light flooded the road, washing over the flare. For a second it looked normal, just a burning stick planted in cracked pavement. But even under the headlights, the red flame refused to illuminate the ground. It burned brightly, yet the asphalt beneath remained untouched. Like the flare wasn't really producing light at all. Just the appearance of it. A warning flickered through my thoughts. Or a signal. I shifted the car into park. The engine ticked softly. I told myself I was only going to step out for a moment. Move the flare. Make sure there wasn't someone hurt around the bend. But as I opened the door, the forest seemed to lean closer. Cold air wrapped around my legs. The silence deepened further. Even the wind had stopped. I stepped onto the asphalt. The road felt slightly damp beneath my shoes. The flare crackled ahead of me. Up close, the color was even stranger. It wasn't just red. It was the red of fresh blood under bright light. The red of warning signs and emergency signals. The red your eyes see after staring too long at something bright. And still the ground remained dark. I crouched beside it. The metal tube was real. I could see the rough texture of the handle. Heat radiated from the flame. But the light simply wasn't there. My shadow should have stretched across the road. Didn't. The flare sputtered again. For a brief instant, the red glow intensified. And the road beyond it changed. Not dramatically, just enough that my stomach dropped. The curve ahead wasn't empty. Something stood there. Not in the trees. On the road. A tall shape directly in the center of the lane. Its outline distorted the air around it, bending the mist like heat waves above asphalt. I blinked. The flare dimmed. The road was empty again. My pulse pounded in my ears. That's when I noticed something else. Marks on the asphalt. Small scuffs. Footprints. They circled the flare in a rough ring. Dozens of them. Not fresh enough to be wet, but clear enough to show someone had walked around this spot over and over again. The pattern formed a loose perimeter around the flare, like someone had paced here for a long time, or waited. A cold sensation crawled up the back of my neck. I stood slowly. The forest remained silent, but the air felt different now. Tighter, closer. The flare burned brighter again. And this time the red glow revealed something behind me. Not a figure. Something worse. Movement. Shapes standing along the road behind my car. Half hidden in the trees. Still. Watching. The glow faded before I could make out details. I spun around. My headlights lit nothing but trunks and branches. Empty forest. I backed away from the flare. My pulse thundered. The sulfur smell had become overwhelming. Like the air itself was burning. I hurried to the car. Slid into the driver's seat. Locked the doors. For several seconds I just sat there breathing hard, staring at the flare through the windshield. It burned steadily. Silent. Patient. Something tugged at my attention then. A shape taped to the back of the flare's metal handle. I hadn't noticed it before. A small square of paper. My stomach twisted. I forced myself out of the car again. Every instinct told me not to, but curiosity dragged me forward. The paper fluttered slightly in the faint heat. I peeled it free. The handwriting was simple. Block letters written in thick black marker. Just one sentence. You stopped exactly where we hoped. The flare suddenly flared brighter. The red glow filled my vision. And this time the light didn't vanish. It spread across the asphalt like liquid. For a single terrible moment, the road around me became visible. Not empty, not silent. Dozens of figures stood just beyond the edge of the light. Perfectly still, perfectly patient, all facing me. And the footprints circling the flare weren't from waiting. They were from practice, learning exactly where drivers stopped when they saw the light. The road through the pass had been empty for miles when I first noticed it. My engine revved on its own, matching the rhythm of something breathing outside. At first, I thought it was just the incline. The road wound through dense forest, climbing gradually along the spine of the mountain. Pines leaned over the asphalt in thick black walls, their branches knitting together so tightly that even the moonlight struggled to reach the pavement. My headlights carved out a narrow tunnel of pale yellow, catching patches of fog drifting across the road like low smoke. The engine rose slightly, then settled again. I frowned and glanced down at the dashboard. The tachometer needle had jumped a little above where it should have been, hovering near 3,000 RPM before dropping back down. Maybe I'd pressed the gas without noticing. Long drives do that. Your foot gets lazy. The road curved gently, the forest pressing closer on either side. My tires whispered over damp asphalt. Somewhere deep in the trees a branch cracked, the sound swallowed almost immediately by the thickness of the woods. The engine rose again. But this time it stayed there a moment longer. I eased my foot completely off the accelerator. The car continued to hum forward, the needle slowly falling. Probably just the transmission shifting awkwardly, I told myself. Old car. Old road. I drove another minute in silence. Then I heard it. Not the engine. Something outside. A slow inhale. At first it was faint, almost indistinguishable from wind moving through the trees. But there was no wind. The fog hung motionless across the road, undisturbed by anything except my passing headlights. The sound came again. A long, hollow breath pulling inward. And my engine rose with it. The tachometer needle climbed smoothly, perfectly, as though someone had gently pressed the accelerator. Then the breath ended. The engine fell. I stared at the dashboard. My foot was still flat on the floor mat. I tried to laugh it off. Loose throttle cable, I muttered to the empty car. Or maybe something electronic. Sensors glitch all the time in older vehicles. Outside, the trees thickened further. The road narrowed slightly, the white shoulder line fading beneath a carpet of fallen pine needles. The air inside the car felt colder than before. The breathing came again. Long, deep, like something massive filling its lungs somewhere in the darkness beyond the headlights. And again the engine responded. My chest tightened. This time the rev lasted exactly as long as the breath. When the inhale ended, the engine dropped immediately, perfectly in sync. I lifted my foot and tapped the gas pedal experimentally. The engine responded normally. RMM, nothing strange. I drove another mile, trying to convince myself I'd imagined the rhythm. But then the breathing returned. Closer now. A slow pull of air that seemed to move along the road beside the car. And my engine matched it again. The tachometer needle climbed with eerie precision, holding steady as the breath deepened. When the exhale came, the engine fell with it. The pattern was unmistakable. I rolled down my window a few inches. Cold air slipped inside. The forest smelled damp and mineral like wet bark and soil. And beneath that, something else. A faint organic smell. Warm. Animal. The breathing continued somewhere out there in the dark. Slow. Deliberate. I accelerated slightly, hoping to outrun whatever strange echo or sound illusion was playing tricks on me. The car surged forward. But the breathing followed. And the engine kept answering. Inhale. Longer now. Deeper. The tachometer climbed higher than before. 3,000. 4. My hands tightened on the wheel. This isn't possible, I whispered. No mechanical failure behaves like that. Engines don't sync with sounds outside the car. Yet it kept happening. Breath, rev, breath, rev. The silence between them felt heavier each time, like the forest itself was waiting. I glanced in the rearview mirror. For a moment I thought I saw something moving along the road behind me. Not headlights, not an animal, just a shape darker than the trees, sliding between them. I blinked. It was gone. The breathing stopped. The engine dropped to idle. The sudden quiet felt worse than the sound. I slowed the car, listening. Nothing. No insects. No wind. Just the faint ticking of the engine. Then, right beside my window, an inhale, close enough that I felt the air move. The engine roared in response. The tachometer needle shot to 5,000. I slammed my foot onto the brake. The car lurched violently but didn't stall. The engine held the rev, screaming in perfect imitation of the enormous breath outside. I turned my head slowly toward the passenger window. The fog had thickened. It pressed against the glass in pale waves, and something in it shifted. Not a solid form, more like an absence. A hollow in the fog shaped roughly like a ribcage expanding. Another inhale. The car responded instantly. The engine screamed louder, vibrating through the steering wheel into my hands. The breathing grew deeper. Hungry. The car shook with each matching rev. That was when I realized something worse. The timing was exact. Not approximate. Not close. Exact. Every inhale matched the engine's climb. Every exhale matched the drop. It wasn't coincidence. It was imitation. Or communication. I shoved the gear into drive and hit the accelerator. The car shot forward down the road, tires squealing briefly against the damp asphalt. For a moment, the breathing lagged behind. Then it returned. Right outside the windows again. Matching speed. Matching distance. The engine answered it automatically. The tachometer climbed again, even though my foot was already pressing the gas. The engine began to sound different, not mechanical. The vibration had changed. Instead of the sharp buzz of combustion, it carried a deeper resonance, like air moving through something hollow. The breathing outside grew louder, and the engine grew louder with it. Soon the two sounds were indistinguishable. I couldn't tell where the car ended and the thing outside began. My chest tightened. I realized with sudden dread that my own breathing had slowed. Without meaning to, I was matching the rhythm too. Inhale. The engine roared. The thing outside inhaled. Exhale. The engine dropped. The thing exhaled. And I followed. I tried to break the pattern. I held my breath. The engine screamed violently, spiking higher. The thing outside inhaled sharply. Demanding. Instinct forced air into my lungs. And the rhythm resumed. By the time the road curved again, the sound had changed completely. The engine no longer sounded like metal and fuel. It sounded wet. Alive. Each rev felt like a lung expanding beneath the hood. Fog swallowed the headlights ahead. In the shifting white haze, something moved across the road. A shape large enough to block the beams for half a second. Then gone. The breathing deepened. The engine responded instantly. The steering wheel trembled beneath my hands. The dashboard lights flickered. And somewhere inside the engine bay something exhaled. Not the exhaust. Something deeper. Something that hadn't been there when the drive began. The car slowed. Not because I pressed the brake. Because it wanted to. The breathing outside slowed with it. The revs softened. Together. Perfectly synchronized. And as the forest closed in around the road, I realized something with a quiet, sinking certainty. The engine wasn't copying the thing outside anymore. The breathing had changed. It now matched the engine. And the car was breathing first.